Open source AI enables people to build incredible things. We see all these cool tools like Notebook.LM or being able to chat with a PDF, but what if we want to build it ourselves? Make them customized, specialized, or just learn how to do it? Where do we even get started? This is where Mozilla.AI Blueprints comes in. Blueprints are a ready-to-use workflow to help developers, especially those new to AI, build AI applications. They're easy, extendable, and open source. And you know we love open source. The team from Mozilla put together some fantastic blueprints, and Tool Use has actually built the first community blueprint. Welcome to episode 33 of Tool Use, the weekly conversation about helpful AI tools that you can use today, brought to you by Kinetic. I'm Mike Bird, along with Ty Fierro. Today we're joined by Alex Meckes, the program manager at Mozilla. Alex, welcome to Tool Use.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we'll start with the question we ask everybody, but how did you get into AI and kind of what was your journey on getting into the industry?
That's a great question. I've always been working with like emerging technology, like early career, kind of started in 3D printing. And I've been kind of, I would say programming adjacent in a lot of them and a bit of a dabbler. And then when ChatGPT kind of rise in prominence, I quickly saw the power of kind of these tools and was like, oh, this is like really potentially impactful. And it's frankly just kind of fun and very enabling from like a creative expression standpoint. It really helps me like build and do things. And prior to Mozilla, I was at Snapchat, and I was able to kind of apply a few different AI tools and a few different developer workflows. So it was like really cool to kind of be kind of tip of the spear when it came to applying these technologies when nobody knew what to do with them. But, you know, we were ready and willing to experiment at Snapchat. So it was like, almost kind of like history from there. It's just kind of fun and very enabling and very kind of, I would say, just like enabling creative expression is why I really like it.
Very cool. Well, I'm a huge fan of Mozilla. I love a lot of their initiatives, but do you mind telling us about Blueprints, what it is?
Yeah, so Blueprints is a new project by Mozilla.AI. So Mozilla.AI is kind of like a slightly different entity than Mozilla itself. But it's kind of like a startup within the Mozilla org. And Blueprints is kind of, they're open source building blocks for building open like AI applications. And we have a pretty heavy emphasis on local models and privacy first and open source models compared to kind of closed solutions. So like what if using open source was, you know, as easy as what like OpenAI like API is now, where it's like it's really easy to get started with their tooling. And on the open source side, I would say it's not quite the same experience. But like the model quality on the open source side is getting better and better. So it's like, but the tooling isn't quite there, and like the workflows aren't quite there. So that's kind of what we're helping trying to solve, is one, kind of be like a front door for technology and building community and ecosystem around open source AI, but also kind of trying to get to parity and making sure like that open source AI wins when it comes to AI adoption.
Interesting. It's interesting you're focusing on like workflows and kind of building blocks and piecing together different pieces. I found with building my own projects, it's kind of very difficult to piece together all these different pieces. And so this idea of like recipes of sorts to try to get started quickly is interesting. How do people get started with a blueprint? Like how does that, how do they run it, and how do these types of things kind of work?
Yeah, there's a few different options. We've found usually the first path is through like a hosted demo. We kind of have a hosted, like each blueprint, well, not every blueprint, but most of the blueprints have sort of like a demo instance on Hugging Face where you can kind of get started without all the overhead of like local install, just to kind of get a sense of the output and the process. So it's probably the easiest first path is through like using that hosted demo just to kind of see if it's accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. And then on the GitHub itself, there's, I would say, pretty thorough documentation. A lot of them have like their own PyPy package where it's like just like a basic, like one command line installs. Not all of them have that exactly, but like we're trying to make this as like, accessible as possible. And there's like a whole technical video walkthrough for each one, and like a relatively thorough documentation. And complexity wise, I think they're usually on like the low to medium end. Like none of these projects are like too big in scope. We want it to be digestible. They're not necessarily an end product in themselves. Maybe they could get there, but it's more kind of a building block for people to kind of riff on top of, where like maybe they see something really interesting in like a documented podcast and they want to kind of take it and go from there versus just kind of like using it as is.
Love the idea of being able to learn by doing and actually just following a blueprint rather than having something handed to you. Would blueprints be appropriate for someone who's not necessarily a developer, but open to trying tools like Cursor, Windsurf, or do you have to be a developer to kind of pick up where they search off?
I think our intended audience is kind of that like AI enthusiast also, where like maybe they're like technically minded, but not like a professional developer. I think they're approachable enough and the code is clean enough where it's very kind of easy to kind of understand what's going in there. But there's also sort of like workflows or like ways to customize it using like on the documented podcast and in particular, there's ways to customize that without really any coding. You can kind of just modify the system prompt and basic sort of like config settings in a YAML file that I think if you like understand how to use Git and like basic like code editing tools, like you won't really struggle with modifying at that level. Like actually modifying the code, you might need a little more experience, but again, like the scope of these projects, they're not really intended to be like really complex or anything like that.
How do you guys decide on which blueprints to build off the start, and what's on the horizon?
That's a great question. We don't have a complete system for like validating and checking blueprints. A lot of it is kind of like what's interesting for our engineering and what like fundamentally we try and make sure that like this is solving a general problem and it kind of like is within scope of like the blueprints framework, where it's like okay, like a local model and an open, like a local model could be effective here because you're somewhat limited in the power of like what a local model can do when it comes to applications, and also like is it a good fit for like a local solution, where like we have a few different sort of like text to speech application blueprints that where I think people in general like privacy forward when it comes to voice, so like and also from like the compute standpoint, most average to good computers could run like Whisper and like other tools like pretty effectively. For those unfamiliar, Whisper is like, I would say like one of the true open source open AI tools that exists, and it's really great for like text to speech kind of like processing. So it's kind of like the standard in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's kind of how we approach it.
Nice. And quick shout out to CJ, who was on last week. He does Whisper files. So taking Whisper and making it so it can run on your computer. Speaking
awesome.
of like,
we should talk to him.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
We have one of our
CJ's
AI engineers, Costas. You've probably seen him in the Discord. Like we've been going down a pretty deep rabbit hole when it comes to text to speech applications, and that's kind of the fun of blueprints. We kind of like uncover as we're building. We uncover like more potential problem areas and more blueprints. So there's always kind of like more to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking on the note of like contributors and making this community effort, do you find there's much engagement from the community in contributing to these blueprints, or is it mostly you guys putting it out and they're kind of taking it as like the start of their life?
Yeah, I mean, like realistically, like we're at the start of the ecosystem and ecosystem building. I think there's like general interest in people building blueprints, but I think like for to kind of really take off, like we don't quite have like the community level needed to like get to that fidelity. I think we need a few more examples of like what a blueprint can be and like more building blocks, because I think like to build a blueprint you still kind of need to be, I would say, a relatively experienced developer. Like like you probably get away with using AI coding tools to build like some good like basic blueprints, but this probably not where a lot of people are going to start. So like we're seeing engagement, like a lot of genuine interest on the usage, and the building is we're getting there. I think that's kind of like building community, and like contributors is in an open source land that's a long-term project. But I think we have like a lot of the foundation set for us to build on top of.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll be more than happy to share our blueprint with people to try to show them that, oh, it's easy, you can put it together
Yeah,
quickly.
exactly. You might be like the first official community blueprint. I think there's a few others we're like in the process of reviewing, but like I think this is kind of the first one that will make it to the finish line.
And yeah, it's one of those things where it's just fun to be able to contribute to initiative that kind of percolates outwards. For someone who is looking to get into contributing, is there anything you can do to get involved? Is there like Discord meetings they could sit in on, or how could you get more people kind of like who are eager to take the next step?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the best spot to keep an eye out is on the Mozilla.AI Discord. That's kind of where the builders, Mozilla Builders hangs out, and a lot of different AI conversations are going on, including a few different Mozilla AI projects like Blueprints. We usually host around like 2 Discord events a month, where it's just kind of like a casual, informal conversation with the community. Either we're like showcasing and doing like a deep dive in 1 or 2 specific blueprints, or like today we had like a brainstorm session on potential blueprint ideas with the community. So that Discord's kind of the current go-to place for community activity. I mean, also like GitHub is another great place to kind of look and see like a lot of these projects have like first issues that like we think would be like good for the community to contribute on. So there's multiple levels to contribute, whether it's like a specific extension you want to do for a blueprint, or even ideation. Like if you have like, man, I really have this like great idea for this blueprint, I'd love to kind of see what could happen here. We're very open to kind of pursuing that. Like you don't necessarily need to be technical to be a part of the community, but you might have more fun once you start building.
And a quick shout out to Matt Cool, done a great job with
Yes,
that Discord and community.
Great guy. Has he been on the podcast?
No, we've been trying, but he's been connecting us. He's been helpful. He's a big fan, big supporter, but he just had his new baby, so I don't think we'll have one anytime soon. Can you shed any insight to how that discussion went today, or is it still just all preliminary?
I mean, there's some like interesting ideas. I really want to build something related to vibe coding. I know that's like the hot topic, but I think there's like a lot of periphery tools that can make it a little bit easier. Like one idea I had was, I've built a few projects end to end using sort of like Cursor, and it's fun, but like if you're kind of going like the true YOLO mode, you're kind of just hitting accept. And I think, let's ignore the problem of like a lot of this code is not necessarily the highest of quality. That's a different discussion. But like from like a user experience paradigm, like I don't necessarily think like text and like text input in our IDE is like the best sort of user experience for that sort of workflow. Like I would love sort of a conversational sort of agent where I could talk my ideas out and kind of see it being built in real time. And I think all the tools exist to make that happen. They're just not necessarily connected in a meaningful way.
I love that you mentioned that. I use Super Whisper right now to play with Cursor.
Really? Okay, maybe this already exists then.
No, but it's not done well. This is
that's
just
kind of what I
dictation
figured.
into the text box, So I think
Like I think you could probably do like some like MCP server or something to kind of add like another agentic layer on top of it to feel more like automated. We'll see. I mean, there's other like small ideas percolating, but like we have one kind of in the works where it's like automatic like slide creation. So it's not just like LLM AI. I think like LLMs are kind of the hot topic, and like there's a lot of potential blueprints, but like we've done like computer vision style stuff too. So like we're relatively open. I think it's going to lean towards generative AI, but there's a lot of room when it comes to open source AI.
Take it back to the vibe coding just for a second. What's your top vibe coding tips? Do you have any secret sauce for other vibe coders out there on how to get the best out of these?
Secret sauce? I mean, just do it.
I love that answer.
Yeah, like I think people overcomplicate it. I think cursor rules are frankly overrated. I guess my challenge, and this is like a general challenge when it comes to vibe coding and rules, is like there isn't really like good evals or like comparison of like this accomplished this better or not. It's just kind of, you just get thrown a lot of best practices, and it's like none of them like prove that it's better. And that's not an easy problem, but like I think you could get, I think the fundamentals of it are like you're gonna have a high ROI talking through and planning in like a reasoning model first, and building out kind of like a architecture and kind of a thought process, and then tackling like the actual problem, versus kind of just jumping in like one shot Minecraft, please. Like this is not necessary. I think one shotting is like kind of a bait. I think it really, I see the most success in LLMs when it's like tackle small problems one at a time, versus kind of like trying to do everything at once. Like it can kind of do it, but then then it gets like soupy pretty quickly. So I think like small sort of like composable code and like modular code and like features, like one feature at a time. Don't be scared about like starting a new instance, a chat in Cursor. That's kind of my tool of choice. And going from there, and like I think it's kind of requires a lot of patience, like, and general coding best practices, I would say, are like good to know, like, because it's like I'm not like a professional coder, but I've coded pre-AI era before, and just understanding like when it's going down like the wrong path is like very useful, because it sometimes does, and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on being able to just grasp coding best practices and general principles. I think it's going to help people so much. You start seeing more things like security issues coming out where people have their API key in the front end. Do you have any other bits of either research or learnings people should conduct as they start getting into building for the first time if they're not experienced developers?
Honestly, I always plan things out with like a reasoning model. Like you're gonna have a pretty good structure and path if you're talking with like an LLM and kind of building almost like a product requirements document or something akin to that, of like, okay, this is kind of like what I want. That may change as you're building it, but like having kind of these like foundational structure is always good. And like just diagramming it and like keeping scope simple. Like just because like most of vibe coding, you're really just trying to get to a prototype. Like you can maybe get away with getting into production with some of these sort of solutions, but like you're just trying to proof of concept something to see if like, oh, there's legs here or not. At least in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think you really want to get to an output.
I loved your opinion on cursor rules. I've been starting to come around to it. So when I first started with cursor rules, I've had these 3 or 4 files that were big and giant and had all this information. And I found recently that it's kind of like poisoning my context window of sorts. And so now I have a single cursor rules that has like 4 sentences in it, and that's it. It's just like the most important things it needs.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too, where it's like I think it's like good to have like baseline stuff. It's more of like, maybe you're like, I mean, I worked a lot in like Lens Studio, which is the developer tool for Snapchat lenses, which uses like a very specific version of JavaScript or TypeScript. So kind of like your output is always in TypeScript sort of rules is like, if you know kind of the language of like what you're building in, like putting that in the rules is a general good best practice.
I'm so glad that vibe coding is catching on. I know it's kind of the word vibe coding got slapped onto this activity of just kind of coding for fun and playing with these LLMs. And
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of parallels. I mean, with Snapchat, love it or hate it, like there's it's a very, they have strong advocates for like ephemeral experiences. Like lenses are kind of like these like 20-second AR experiences, and I think like coding and applications, I think they're more turning into like these disposable one-off tools you could kind of build and then they die, and it's like that's okay. Like I think that's like actually really an interesting shift in kind of like the ability to make things. and it's like when it comes to like democratization of tools, it's like the more that people use it and come with different perspectives, like I think like net benefit, yes, there's challenges. Yes, a lot of the code output is frankly not very good. But, but like I think like in general, it's better when more people are making things. And like I think people that are haters, maybe like I understand, but also like it's pretty useful just to be able to like
Yeah.
ideate.
I have a buddy, he does sales, and they bought the entire sales team Cursor subscriptions, even though they don't have dev experience, just because they're like, if you have an idea for something that makes your job better, turn it into a real thing. And it lowers the bar. It makes it that much more bespoke and custom. I fully agree. It's really interesting that we're hitting this point where if you have an idea, you don't need the coding superpower. You can just turn your idea with natural language.
When also if you like when I've in my many attempts of learning programming, the most success I've had is when I build things that I want to build. And like, like you're gonna learn almost by force sometimes because like the coding agent gets caught in a loop where it's like, okay, now I have to learn how to program. But it's like you're gonna like you learn by building. At least I think most people do, and this enables you to build. So I just think that like net overall value of that as like a tool is cannot be like emphasized enough. I think it's really cool.
So many parallels here from code, vibe coding to blueprints too, because learn by building, and that's if you can just pull down these little things and start to learn real fast, and I don't know, it's really interesting that you guys are kind of on that bleeding edge there.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the start. We recently got some new leadership in, and like we're trying to set direction for the year and future years. Like I think like there's something fundamentally valuable about around the concept of vibe coding and this like next generation of AI coders and like developers that like don't necessarily come from a traditional developer background, where it's like I think there's an interesting path where like blueprints and sort of like using AI tools on top of it, like to easily build blueprints. It's definitely direction. We haven't committed to that direction yet, but to me, like there's a lot of potential paths here, and that's what's fun. Like it's kind of the front door for a lot of the work that we're doing at Mozilla AI.
Just curious, what AI tools do you use in your day-to-day or your work life?
I mean, I wish I could say I use all open source tools, but I don't, and that's maybe a reflection of some of the challenges with open source. But I use a lot, like because we have ChatGPT Enterprise, so I use a lot of that. I really like 4.5, like the relatively new release feels very human. And that's honestly kind of what I want in a lot of these things. I don't need like PhD level reasoning or anything like that. I just need kind of like basic back and forth. Like Anthropic on some level, but honestly more so in like Cursor than anything else now. Like I've used on the blueprint side, like common tools we've used is like Llama, CPP, like obviously Hugging Face for like deployment, like Gradio or Streamlit for basic sort of like demo setup too. Yeah, I mean, the applications on the blueprints have been pretty varied, so there isn't necessarily a set tool chain yet, but definitely a lot of Llama CPP, just because like local install is like still a huge barrier, and things like that. And like Streamlit or Gradio for the output is also like pretty common, just because like that's probably the quickest way to prototype like a front end and things like that.
Yeah, gets it looking decent. I actually kind of want to double click on the one thing you mentioned, because I agree. I try to use open source tools, but there's some tasks where it's just not up to par. And I know the models just keep getting better and better, and like the gap is closing, and then a big release comes out and we had to start all over again. But outside of the model training, do you see a clear area of need of improvement in the open source AI ecosystem?
Frankly, it's probably more on the front end of it than anything. Because like the reason why I default to like OpenAI or like Claude is because they're like basic non-API level interface is like pretty good. And like you could get, I mean, it's really just chat with some flavor on top of it, but you could get like a good output in 10 seconds, and on the front page. Where if you want to use like an open source model, that's a little more complicated to kind of get that output. I mean, like DeepSeek is good. But it's also kind of comes with its own set of challenges, and it doesn't necessarily have like the same sort of adoption on like the chat level. But like, I think it just depends on. It would be good to have like a good like improved front end on par with like what the common tools are, where that's kind of like the go-to place for like open source AI. That's kind of what I see. I mean, obviously, like I think from like a model output perspective, I mean, there's debate on like we debate on like open source, true open source, and not when it comes to like Llama and DeepSeek, but like they're pretty good models, like from an output perspective. So like they're not deeply different than like output you would get from Claude or OpenAI or things like that.
It's a really interesting answer of the front end being kind of a missing piece for open source right now. And I totally feel that, because when I want to go use a local model, I go to like Ollama. I've also played with Jan a little bit, some of these tools, and it's those are okay, but
It's high friction.
Yeah, right. It feels there is friction there. It feels like I got the ChatGPT window just always open, and I just go right to it, get what I need, and they make it easy, and that's going to be tough to beat. But I don't think it's an insurmountable problem. There's some interesting UI open source projects coming out, but I feel like there's almost a need for like a standardization or something, or like one open source UI thing to win that we all kind of build on top of or something, because it's very fragmented in the open source world. You kind of have to try
I mean, that's kind of the pro and the con of open source, where it's like there's always a lot of different ideas. There isn't necessarily one standard, and there's like that famous XKCD comic of like, I know what we'll do, we'll create our own standard. And then you just have one more standard on top of it. So I wish there was a better solution for this, but this is kind of an output of open source in some way. I think it eventually fixes itself. But like I'm optimistic, and I think like fundamentally it's like it's a big battle of getting to parity of these closed source solutions. Like that's kind of the like step one, where it's like where people could trust that the output is close, if not better than these closed source solutions, and then going from there.
Yeah, and I do want to give just one more shout out to the Discord server, because I feel like the ability to congregate people together who are like-minded, working together, bounce ideas off. So if people can hop on the community calls, or I know they have a bunch of different presentations and whatnot, but just meeting the community and getting engaged is a good way to expedite things. And if you're looking to break into the space, build a profile for yourself or whatnot, open source is a phenomenal way to do it.
Yeah, like shout out to the builders community and like the Mozilla.AI Discord. It's like, like it's not a huge like ecosystem yet, but like it's kind of the who's who. Like there's some really high quality projects and products in there, and everyone is like very open and like willing to talk, and you get kind of an inside scoop on a lot of different projects, which is like really neat. So yeah, if you're interested in being part of a rapidly growing ecosystem and seeing how open source AI projects work, like the builders community is a really great place to start.
Yeah, community is so important. I love having people to chat with. Big fan of the Discords. Well, I think I've got one last question for you from my end, but what tips would you give to budding builders right now that are just learning to code? You've given some advice already, but I'm curious what your like top advice would be for someone that's just getting started right now and maybe is overconfident with vibe coding and thinks that they can ship an entire production software or whatever it is. But
I mean, I would say like consider open source. Like I think like people are surprised about the level of quality and output they could get with these tools, and also then you have kind of the foundations and system to kind of understand the inner workings of like what's actually happening in the in-between, which I think is like fundamental to building like better products over time. So people starting like you're kind of building using open source, I feel like you could really build better foundational understanding of how these things work, because you have actually, it's not a black box. So you can kind of see like what's happening and better understand it. And the better you understand, like the more you can do with it. I think that's kind of what that's my plug for open source. But also, I mean, general plug of like, I mean, you could just do things like, this is the era of making stuff. So if you have an idea, like even silly ideas, they're still pretty fun. Like I built like a bingo card creator, which is like not very complicated, but like I had to learn like Supabase and like all these different tools that I didn't necessarily have a lot of deep experience on before this. And it's like, oh yeah, like because I wanted to make this funny and weird project, I got like a lot of experience in this like new technology that it's been very useful in other projects in my professional work also.
Awesome. I'm really excited for the direction Blueprint will go. Could you just give a couple list of the ones you're most excited for, the ones that might be your favorite that already exist?
I really like the OpenStreetMap AI helper one, where you kind of help find pools in like OpenStreetMap and potentially log them. It's almost like this weird little mini game. It's like really kind of interesting like demo. I think also the speech to text fine tuning one, like I mean that's pretty specific to that sort of audience, where it's like it's kind of a whole pipeline of like transcribing, like fine tuning for like your specific language. And we're seeing like we're doing more testing now, but we're seeing a lot of really good results when like with just basic fine tuning with small data sets on your own like language. And it's just like a lightweight tooling and pipeline for this. So I think that's really powerful. I mean, all of them are really interesting and pretty different audiences, to be frank. So like I would say take a look, and if you have ideas, let us know.
Perfect. Alex, this has been a blast. Anything else you want the audience to know before we let you go?
No, I think that's it.
Awesome.
It's been great having
See you later.
See you, Alex.
Yeah.